My name is Sarah Miller, 36 years old, senior product strategist at Argonne and Cole, a consulting firm specializing in defense technology based in Boston. In the professional world, I'm known as someone who practically doesn't sleep. For the past 11 weeks, I've practically lived in the office, buried in lines of code, logistics maps, and complex AI models. This project was a dream, an effort to overhaul the entire supply system for US defense contractors. I called it Falconet. Falconet isn't just another algorithm. It's a military logistics optimization system designed for conflict zones, using real-time data, tactical sensors, and autonomous analysis. If successful, Falconet could cut strategic transport time from 8 days to just 26 hours. Estimated contract value, if approved, $16 million. That morning, I sat upright in front of my screen, eyes bloodshot from consecutive sleepless nights. The clock read 6:43 a.m. I saved the final presentation to a secure hard drive, then leaned back, exhaling as if escaping a nightmare. That's it, I muttered, my hand slightly trembling as I hit print. The papers rolled out, each page filled with every ounce of my intellect, energy, and faith. At 8:30 a.m., I would present Falconet to Norcon Dynamics, the largest defense corporation on the East Coast. This contract was my future. Just as I stood up to collect the pages, my phone buzzed. A text from my boss, Nolan Grant, "Come to my office, now." I gripped the folder and rushed toward the elevator. Nolan, 52, was a managing partner at Argonne and Cole. Outsiders called him a strategic genius. I knew better. Nolan hadn't had an original idea in the 4 years I worked under him. The door opened. Nolan was leaning against the desk, smirking like he already knew how this day would go. "You ready?" he asked. "I've triple-checked everything. It's perfect," I replied, handing him the deck. He flipped a few pages and nodded. "Impressive, Sarah." I should have felt proud, but something in his gaze chilled me. There was something too composed, too controlled. It set off every alarm. "I think we should tweak the delivery," he said, laying the packet on his desk. "I'll handle the presentation. You'll support me from the back." I froze. Didn't argue. Didn't agree. Just felt the energy drain from my body. For weeks, Nolan had ignored every update on Falconet. He never asked about the framework, never attended data tests. But now, just hours before our pitch to Norcon, he suddenly decided to take the lead. I added a special section about how the routing logic is based on the Cold War-era Echo 9 supply route in Greenland. That's actually where the name Falconet comes from, I explained. Nolan raised an eyebrow. "Clever." I walked out of his office with heavy steps, my gut twisting. I wanted to believe he meant well, but I knew better. Not with Nolan Grant. Not when he once told me, half joking, "Creativity's just another thing you can borrow, if you're smart enough." 4 years working in someone else's shadow had taught me to stay quiet, endure, and outwork everyone. But this time, everything was different. Falconet wasn't just a prototype, it was a statement of worth. The first real chance I had to prove that I wasn't just a competent woman in the room. I was the one meant to lead it. I looked at the clock. 68 minutes until the pitch. My heart was racing. Not from nerves, but from instinct. Some battles don't begin with gunfire. They start with a smile and a sentence like, "I'll present this one." The meeting with Norcon Dynamics was held on the 42nd floor of the Belmont Grand Hotel, a modern glass tower overlooking Boston Harbor. When I arrived, the receptionist handed me a guest badge, but my name wasn't on the meeting agenda. I looked around, confused. Nolan stepped out of a private elevator, shirt crisp, gray tie perfectly aligned. "Sarah, thanks for coming," he said, as if greeting a hotel staffer. "Slight change of plans. I'll be taking this meeting solo. You wait in the lounge. Just a presentation strategy." "I thought I was presenting the algorithm module," I asked, keeping my voice calm. "The client only needs the big picture for now. We'll save the technical details for later." He smirked and walked away without waiting for a reply. I stood frozen. My files, the Falconet blueprint, simulation data, module diagrams were in the briefcase he carried. I followed him part way, stopping just outside the meeting room. Through the thick glass, I saw him shaking hands with Norcon's team, two men in navy suits and a silver-held woman who looked like an executive. A minute later, the screen lit up. The first slide made my blood run cold. The title no longer read Falconet, Adapted Defense Logistics AI. Instead, StratPath, Strategic Supply Chain Autonomy. Same color scheme, same layout, same font, but the name was different, and mine was completely erased. I stared through the glass, jaw clenched. Nolan began his pitch with practiced confidence, pointing to a diagram I'd built after 2 sleepless nights. We developed this system after extensive research into asymmetric warfare supply routes, he said, echoing words I'd once used in an internal presentation. Everything from drone visuals to HETMAC overlays was my work. For 35 minutes, he spoke as if he were the sole creator, and I was nothing more than a shadow behind the glass. The silver-held Norcon executive nodded along, jotting notes. I heard him refer to our technical support team as if the entire project had been handled by a nameless background crew. That team, in his version, was me. When the presentation ended, I walked off quickly, afraid my face would betray the fury building inside me. I went into the restroom on the 41st floor, locked myself in a stall, and leaned against the wall. My heart pounded. My name wasn't mentioned. Not once. No credit. No acknowledgement that Sarah Miller had built this system from scratch. My phone buzzed. A text from Nolan. They loved it. I'll follow up later. Don't share anything. We need to keep this internal. Internal? I almost laughed out loud. That wasn't strategy. That was theft. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my file manager app and accessed a secured folder I'd set up months earlier. F1_Hawkgreen, Falconet's original codename. Inside were the untouched core files, mathematical models, logic diagrams, handwritten strategy notes. Every document was time-stamped, digitally signed. I'd backed them up to a private cloud, one no one at the company knew about. I quickly duplicated the most critical items into a new folder, Phoenix_protocol. Then I remembered someone. Dr. Hannah Delacroix, my former university advisor, now a senior technical consultant on Norcon's AI defense projects. I'd never used that connection before, but today I pressed call. She answered after 3 rings. Sarah, oh my God, how long has it been? I kept my voice steady. I need help, but first, I may have to tell you something really ugly. I stepped out of the restroom, put in my earbuds, and began to recount everything. Every detail, every betrayal, every line of data Nolan had stripped my name from. Dr. Hannah was quiet for a long moment. Then she said just one sentence. Send me 3 things: the original proposal with timestamps, the first version of the core code, and proof that Nolan has no idea what Falconet actually is, if you have it. I smiled, not out of joy, but certainty. I had exactly that. A recording from a meeting 4 weeks ago where Nolan stared at my routing model and asked, Falconet? Sounds like a game. Where'd you get that name from? I had saved the clip as a reminder of how far I'd come. I never imagined it would become evidence. That night, I didn't go home. I booked a small room at a riverside hotel along the Charles and turned on every light. I set my laptop on the desk and began combing through every piece of memory from the past 3 months. Every email, note, and Zoom meeting I'd recorded, out of habit. My external drive was full of files with code names like F_net_rev1, autosim_grid_logic, or echoroute_v3. Each file had a timestamp, a digital signature, and metadata, proving I was the creator. It wasn't just data. It was the lifeblood I poured out over hundreds of sleepless hours. I opened a 17-minute audio file, a recorded internal meeting between me, Nolan, and an analyst named Josh. In it, I explained the core algorithm for supply chain variance analysis under wartime conditions. Toward the end, Nolan asked with a dismissive tone, "Do we really need those alternate routes? I thought they were just simulation models." I had laid out the reasoning in detail, even sent him a graduate paper I wrote, where falconet first started forming as a conceptual seed. He'd nodded vaguely at the time. I saved the audio file under a new name, noclue_ng. Close to midnight, I created a private folder on my cloud storage account with two-factor authentication and double encryption. I named it Red Raven, a warning sign, a reminder that I could no longer afford to be naive. I wrote an email with the subject line, "Confidential support request, Sarah Miller. Recipient, Dr. Hannah Delacroix." I attached 3 files: the original falconet proposal, the recording of Nolan not understanding the project's name, and the initial design file with my first digital signature. I added a brief note. "If anyone deserves to know the truth, it's you. I'm not looking for scandal, I just want justice. Falconet deserves to exist the right way." 10 minutes later, Hannah replied, "Send more. Complete internal email threads, original simulation files, and any material proving you're the sole system architect. Let me see if Norcon can intervene at a higher level." I didn't ask questions, I just acted. By 4 a.m., I was sitting under the dim glow of a bedside lamp, opening every archived copy, prototype, and performance spreadsheet. Corporate logos faded, but S. Miller still printed across each title page. I compiled them into a single dossier of 23 items. Falconet_origin proof PL. At 9 a.m., Hannah messaged, "Norcon received the documents. I make no promises, but their CEO, Alan Vance, hates being lied to." I knew of Alan Vance, a former Air Force officer, firm, direct, once quoted at a defense summit saying, "We invest in solutions, not office politics." By noon, I got a call from a private number. I stepped onto the hotel balcony, hands still trembling. "This is Sarah Miller?" "Yes." "This is Alan Vance. We've reviewed the files. I have a few questions, but first, I want to confirm one thing. Has Nolan Grant ever, in any document, been listed as a co-developer of Falconet?" "No, never." "Then why did his slides yesterday say proprietary innovation proposed by Nolan Grant?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Silence was enough. Alan's voice lowered. "I'd like to meet privately, not at Norcon, this afternoon. Small cafe in South End. Bring all original files. And don't worry, this isn't a test. I just want to know if I've been placing my trust in the right person." When he hung up, I stood still, river breeze slicing across my face. I knew that moment marked a threshold. There would be no turning back. If I stepped forward, Falconet would no longer live in the shadowed offices, where Nolan stamped it with team innovation. That afternoon, I arrived at the cafe as agreed, a quiet spot with soft jazz playing in the background. Alan Vance was already there, in a brown coat, looking directly at me as I entered. "You're not the first to have your work stolen," he said after a few pleasantries, "but you might be the first to document it this well." I'm impressed. I sat down, opened my laptop, and pulled up the Red Raven folder. He said nothing, just nodded and began reading. His eyes moved quickly, his expression tightened. After 20 minutes, he closed the laptop. "Just one question, Sarah. Would you be willing to lead the project if we cut ties with argon and coal?" It didn't take me more than 3 seconds to respond. Yes, if Falconet exists with the right name, the right person, and in the right way, I'm ready. 2 days after the meeting with Alan Vance, I was called to attend a strategic meeting between Norcon and Argon and Coal, held in the conference room on the 18th floor of Norcon's headquarters in Cambridge. Agenda: signing the official contract to implement StratPath, the name Nolan used to replace Falconet. I wasn't surprised to receive the invitation. What caught my attention was that my name was listed under technical coordination, no longer just a temporary support, as Nolan had once dismissively brushed off. At 8 a.m., I walked into the room in a black suit, hair neatly tied up. Nolan had already arrived, chatting and smiling with 3 representatives from Norcon, including Alan. He looked at me, gave a slight nod, his face unreadable. I nodded back, without a word. On the table, each person had a printed contract in a black folder embossed with Norcon's silver logo. Sarah, Nolan called my name with a polite tone. You're handling the technical side today. I'll present the strategic overview first. Of course, I replied evenly, as long as I'm asked the right parts. The meeting began with familiar slides. Still the same logistics diagrams, maps of military operation zones, supply chain analysis. Still the Falconet model, except the name StratPath was now stamped at the top of each slide. Nolan spoke fluently, clicking through with practiced ease like he'd done this all his life. I sat still, taking notes, eyes locked on his hand holding the clicker. Everything went smoothly until Alan Vance abruptly interrupted him at slide 17. Mr. Grant, he said, his voice slow but clear, before we move to signing, I have a small question purely out of personal curiosity. Nolan gave a professional smile. Of course, go ahead. StratPath, what was the original name of this system before it was renamed? I didn't look up. I heard Nolan pause for a fraction of a second. Just a draft name, not important. Falcon something, if I remember correctly. An unofficial name. Falconet, Alan said, eyes fixed on him. I've heard of it. Does the name mean anything? Nolan licked his lips, regaining composure. As I said, just a test label, probably something the tech team threw on for fun. I focus more on practical solutions than naming. Alan nodded, then turned his gaze to me. Zara, do you know why the system was originally named Falconet? I put my pen down, lifted my head, my eyes calm. Yes. Falconet was the codename I chose based on a U.S. Air Force logistics route established in 1961 in northern Greenland, the only place where automated transport units could operate efficiently under extreme cold and disrupted signal conditions. That's the historical foundation for the system's routing algorithm. And the inspiration behind Falconet? No one spoke for 3 seconds. Nolan gave a forced smile. Right. Sarah contributed a few interesting historical details. Of course, the entire solution is a team effort. Alan didn't argue, but I clearly saw the exchanged glances between him and the legal representative across the table. No one spoke against Nolan, but no one backed him up either. The rest of the meeting unfolded in a strange atmosphere, not cold but cautious. Every one of Nolan's answers seemed to be listened to more closely, cross-checked more carefully. No one showed clear emotion, but I knew. The game had shifted. After the presentation ended, Alan stood up and shook hands with everyone. We'll do one final contract review. Might need an extra day to adjust a few legal details. Nolan nodded, smiling confidently. Completely understand, this is a big project, no need to rush. I was the last to stand. As I walked toward the door, Alan stepped closer, hands still in his pockets, and spoke, just loud enough for only me to hear. The story you told this morning, someone else has confirmed it. Well done, Sarah. I said nothing, just nodded slightly. On the way out of the building, Nolan turned to me as we entered the private elevator. What game are you playing? He hissed. Let me warn you, don't think a few little stories can wreck this contract. I looked him straight in the eye. I'm not playing any game. I just answered the question, like you asked. The elevator doors opened. I walked out without looking back. One question, one name, one small truth spoken at the right moment. 3 days after the meeting, I received a direct call from Alan Vance's office. The assistant's voice was gentle but clear. Mr. Vance would like to invite you to the Norcon Executive Operations Suite tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. Private. I didn't ask for a reason. I wasn't worried. I just knew I was stepping into the most important turning point of my 15-year career. The next morning, I arrived 30 minutes early. The executive suite was on the top floor, reserved only for strategic-level leaders. When I entered, I saw Alan standing by the glass wall, looking down at Boston Harbor, hands in his pockets, like he was planning a high-stakes chess move. Thank you for being punctual, he said, turning around and gesturing to the conference table where there were only 2 cups of hot coffee. Have a seat. I have a proposal, and it will change everything. I sat with my back straight, no smile, no nod, just waiting for him to continue. After reviewing all the data chains, IP creation, timestamps, records, and independent statements from those who've worked with you, he paused, sliding a black folder toward me. We no longer have any doubt. Falconet is yours. Entirely. I opened the folder. Inside was Norcon's official offer letter. Position: Chief Innovation Director, Falconet Division. Salary: $1,250,000 per year, plus project equity. Scope: full creative and technical authority over the Falconet system. The official project name: Falconet Restored, per the original proposal. Founder: Sarah Miller. I looked up, trying to keep my voice steady. What about Argonne and Cole? Alan smiled, but his eyes didn't. They'll receive the termination notice this afternoon, but... He pushed a gold envelope toward me. If you'd prefer to deliver it yourself, the option is yours. Call it personal justice, no obligation. I placed my hand on the envelope without opening it. My mind was spinning, not because of the money, not the title, but because for the first time what I created wasn't being twisted, stolen, or disguised as a team initiative. I just need one night to get everything in order, I said, and one meeting with Nolan, private. Alan nodded. All right, but don't take too long. Falconet can't wait. That afternoon, I sent a short message to Nolan's assistant. Tomorrow morning, 7:30. I'd like to hand over all technical data on StratPath. Just a quick meeting. No one else needed. She replied within 10 minutes. Confirmed. Conference room B3, 9th floor. I closed my laptop and packed up my hotel desk. One small cardboard box held my personal laptop, encrypted drives, and notebooks. 9 years at Argonne and Cole, now boxed into 8 pounds of memory. At dawn, I arrived at Argonne's main building ahead of schedule. The front desk looked surprised, but handed me an access pass. I took the elevator to the 9th floor, walked into conference room B3, the same place where I'd pitched Falconet for the first time, to 3 silent men and 1 smirking face. Nolan walked in at 7:32, still the gray suit, the carefully knotted tie, the well-rehearsed confidence. What do you want to hand over? He asked, sitting and flipping open his notebook like it was a routine technical check-in. I slid the gold envelope across the table. Not a handover. This is Norcon's contract termination notice. They chose the person who created Falconet to lead the project, not the one who renamed it. Nolan stared at me for a few seconds as if he didn't understand. Then he opened the envelope. When his eyes hit the words, termination of all collaborative agreements with Argonne and Cole, his face turned from pale to burning red. You can't, he growled. You don't have the authority. I don't need authority. I just need the truth, and you gave it away at that last meeting. One simple question. One name. And you couldn't answer. Nolan clenched the envelope, eyes fixed on me like he could incinerate me with sheer will. But I stood, picked up my small box, straightened my coat, and walked to the door. Next time, I said as I gripped the handle, if you want someone to stay silent, at least understand the product you're trying to steal. Just 1 week after I left Argonne and Cole, the tide began to turn. It started internally. A legal department email circulated to all management. Access to strategic data for Mr. Nolan Grant is temporarily suspended for the purpose of internal investigation. No public statement, no formal warning, but everyone knew something serious had been triggered. For the next 3 days, Nolan was absent from every meeting. His office door stayed locked, lights off. Whispers spread that a formal complaint had come from Norcon, that the company's biggest strategic partner had terminated their contract without notice. I didn't care about the rumors. I was busy. Norcon had granted me full authority to rebuild Falconet the right way. And the first step wasn't technical implementation, it was recruitment. And I knew exactly who the first name should be: Emily Sanders. Last year's strategy intern at Argonne, she had helped me analyze logistics data from the Alaska network. She created the very first scenario response simulation for the core algorithm and was cut out by Nolan after one meeting, simply for correcting a mistake in his slides. Found her on LinkedIn. My message was just 2 lines. Hi, Emily. I'm building a new Falconet team, the original version. Want to do it right this time, with full creative control? She replied within 5 minutes. If you're leading, I'm in. 1 week later, Emily walked into our new Norcon office with a latte in hand and eyes that sparkled like someone freed from prison. I handed her the official offer: Junior Systems Analyst, $98,000 a year with project-based advancement. She looked at me, trembling and smiling. I've never officially been called an analyst. At Argonne, I was always support. Here, I said, you're foundational. And I didn't stop there. I reached out to 2 former colleagues of Nolan's, a developer demoted to supplementary research for daring to suggest algorithm upgrades, and a data analyst who had resigned silently after their internal report was ignored. Both said yes, not for the higher salary, but because they believed this time no one would erase their names from the final credits. As the new Falconet team slowly took shape, Argonne and Cole descended into chaos. An industry blog leaked the news. Norcon terminates $16 million contract with Argonne and Cole, citing internal creative ethics violation. Not long after, an anonymous account named TruthScan posted an audio clip of Nolan asking, "What's Falconet? Sounds like a strategy game." The defense engineering community buzzed. A flurry of detailed posts analyzing Falconet, from data architecture to routing strategy, all pointed to a single name: Sarah Miller. I didn't speak, nor did Norcon, but everyone understood. The truth was no longer in the hands of those who used power to bury it. 2 weeks later, Nolan was officially removed from the senior leadership page on the company website. An internal memo stated he had resigned under mutual agreement, corporate lingo for a forced exit. I learned about it while reviewing the Q2 recruitment budget. Emily sent me the link with just 3 words. It's done now. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I typed back, "We don't seek revenge. We rebuild. Right and without fear." At that exact moment, another email came in from Norcon's HR department. Subject: approval request. 3 new positions for Falconet team. Priority given to those previously marginalized. I clicked approve without hesitation. Because this time, no one gets sidelined. No more people listening outside the meeting room as someone else reads their idea aloud. Falconet isn't just a system, it's becoming a home for those whose voices were once stolen, now given back, with respect and responsibility. And Nolan? I hear he's trying to land a role at a small civilian logistics startup. Maybe this time he'll learn. Once reputation falls, PowerPoint and lies can't patch it back together. 3 months after I officially took over as Chief Innovation Officer at Norcon, the name Falconet had already outgrown the confines of our lab. What began as an internal prototype was now active at 3 major U.S. Air Force bases: Minot, Travis, and Fairchild. My engineering team, once just 6 people, had grown into a 33-member division, split across 6 specialized units. We called it the Strategic Brain, an integrated network for real-time logistics simulations, emergency response, and adaptive routing in extreme operational conditions. Using Falconet's first quarter revenue after commercialization hit $72 million, far surpassing Norcon's Strategic Council's projections. When asked for the secret, I gave a short answer: room for truth, room for the worthy, and room for protected creativity. I never mentioned Nolan. Not in press conferences, not in forums, not even at the MIT Tech Forum where I was invited as the keynote speaker. I didn't have to. History has its own memory. Instead, I told the story of Falconet, from the strategic inspiration behind Echo 9 supply corridors to the system's ability to simulate a critical failure point in under 8 seconds, and how it continuously self-optimized after each mission. Every time I ended my talk with the question, if military operations are held to a zero coral standard, why do we tolerate delays in their supply chain? The room always went silent. A month later, the Department of Defense reached out. Falconet would be piloted in the upcoming multinational coordination exercises in Guam and Okinawa. We worked through the nights to reconfigure the system based on terrain data, regional weather, and cross-border logistics flows. Emily led the regional routing module, and it was her who proposed the groundbreaking unified multi-platform sync feature, a data integration mode for civilian drones and maritime control systems. When Defense Tech Weekly featured us on its cover with the headline, Falconet, from personal concept to allied defense backbone, the photo wasn't just me, it was the whole team. That was my request. Within NORCON, Falconet became a textbook example of leadership through transparency and merit. Every contributor was credited, every idea had a trackable log, and all solutions were archived, annotated, and shared. I didn't need to be at the center of it all. I just had to stand in the right place and protect the people doing the real work. One morning in October, while I was meeting with our media team to prep for the upcoming Pacific Defense Strategy Forum, a team member silently placed a printed email on the table and walked out. It was from a small Houston-based firm called Spherologics. Their board chairman had just signed a contract with a new strategic advisor, name Nolan Grant. I stared at the name for a few seconds, then folded the paper and set it aside. No anger, no smugness, no unnecessary emotion. By noon, I got a message from a modern defense journalist. We heard Mr. Grant applied to be a NORCON consultant last month. Since you're leading Falconet, do you have a comment? I replied with one sentence. We assess every candidate by their current capability, not past titles. I knew that would be the headline, and I also knew those who needed to understand. 1 year after Falconet was officially deployed in Guam, Sarah Miller had become a household name at every federal-level defense forum. When I stepped onto the main stage at the National Defense Logistics Forum in Arlington, the spotlight hit the laser-cut metal emblem behind me, an eagle with outstretched wings embracing a global map. Hundreds of delegates from the Pentagon, NATO, Lockheed Martin, and the Department of Homeland Security were in attendance. In my hand was a speech only 3 pages long, yet each line distilled a journey no one else had witnessed. The Council's executive director introduced me first. The next speaker is one of the minds who redefined how we understand real-time military logistics, the founder of Falconet MS, Sarah Miller. The thunderous applause didn't overwhelm me. It simply felt right on time. Thank you, I began, scanning the audience. When I wrote the first line of code for Falconet, I never imagined it would run on a global platform. I just wanted to answer one question. If everything else fails, what route still survives? I didn't mention Nolan, I didn't mention argon and coal, I spoke only of people, precision, and the need for ethics to stand behind every algorithm. After the presentation, I shook hands with the Deputy Secretary of Defense. A week later, PBS's Voices of Innovation invited me to join their upcoming feature. I initially declined. I didn't want to become a public figure. But after a private call with the producer, whose brother had died in a delayed rescue mission due to a supply chain failure, I agreed. The recording took place in a modest DC studio. Beneath the soft ceiling lights, I spoke of a winter night when I sat alone by a hotel window, writing code without knowing what tomorrow would bring. I spoke of Emily, of those who were once excluded from meetings for lack of seniority, and how Falconet was built by hands that held no power. Within 4 days, the episode garnered over 3 million views. Then came the letters, handwritten from veterans, young engineers, and logistics students still finding their voice in a male-dominated field. One read, "I never thought a military system could stand for justice. Now I believe it can." And Nolan? His name faded from the trade headlines. His LinkedIn account stopped updating. An internal source shared that he was now teaching part-time at a community college in Missouri, lecturing on business ethics. One Friday afternoon, as I was signing off on a scholarship grant for a group of women studying strategic AI at Georgia Tech, my assistant, Olivia, walked in with an envelope. This came by mail, she said, hesitating. No return address, but I think you should see it. I opened it. A handwritten letter in blue ink, the handwriting all too familiar. I used to think intelligence could be owned if I presented it first, but Falconet proved me wrong. I'm not asking for forgiveness, just want you to know. I understand now. I folded the letter, placed it in my desk drawer, and didn't respond. Because I never did this for an apology. I did it so no one else would have their voice stolen. And if my success made someone like Nolan reconsider his path, good. But if not, I would still keep going. Not for the past, but for the ideas waiting to be protected. That evening, I stood in my office at Norcon, gazing down at the city lit up below. Emily walked in, gently knocking on the doorframe. You're still here. I knew it. Don't tell me we've got new volunteers for Falconet too. More than that, Emily smiled. 3 people, including Argonne's former data head. They all said the same thing. We don't want to redraw the old graph. We want to build something new, where the name behind the idea finally gets the credit. I smiled back and returned to my desk. 1 year after Falconet's global launch, I approved the most important initiative of my career at Norcon, the Innovation Integrity Protocol. I had wrestled with this for months, not just because of what I'd been through, but because I knew there were thousands like me, silent engineers, young researchers, interns whose names never made the report. People once told, this idea will gain more traction if someone else's name is on it. The protocol outlined 3 principles. Every creative contribution must be credited at the start of the project with clear ownership rights. Any major changes to the structure of an idea must be approved by its original proposer. Technical leads cannot erase anyone's credited work from a project unless there is clear evidence of plagiarism or critical misconduct. I didn't write this as a director. I wrote it as someone who had once sat in the hallway watching her own presentation slide appear under someone else's name. At first, some senior executives at Norcon called it a bit idealistic, but then our internal legal team stepped forward in support after uncovering a rising number of anonymous complaints about stolen concepts in the defense tech sector. 3 months after the protocol was enacted, 5 of our major partners, including Sentinel Aero, Larkfield Robotics, and Firebelt Defense Systems, requested permission to adopt it as their internal standard. A year later, I received an email from the Smithsonian National Museum of American History. We're organizing a special exhibition titled Women in National Innovation, scheduled to run for 18 months. We'd like to request the original Falconet prototype for display, alongside a feature on its development and your impact on military logistics. I reread the message several times, not because I was surprised, but because I was moved. The Falconet prototype had been sitting in Norcon's archive, a steel box nearly 3 feet tall, housing worn processors and outdated sensors, yet still preserving its core architecture. I had kept it as a personal reminder, but now it belonged somewhere people wouldn't just walk past, but stop to understand. I agreed with one condition, that the display plaque clearly read, designed by Sarah Miller and the Falconet Core team, first developed in Boston, 2022. On opening day, I stood behind a group of high school students as their guide led them through the exhibit. A curly-haired girl with a teal backpack pointed at the prototype and asked, "Did she know she was making history?" The guide smiled. "She's standing right over there. You can ask her yourself." The group turned to me. Some whispered, some froze. I stepped forward and said gently, "Now, I didn't think I was making history. I just knew I couldn't let what was right disappear." Another student raised their hand. "How do you protect your ideas from being stolen?" I looked into their eyes and replied, "Document everything. Write it down, back it up, and work only in places that value truth over titles. And most importantly, never stay silent when something you created is taken." After that day, I received invitations from 3 universities, Stanford, NYU, and Cornell, to speak about innovation protection models. A piece in Harvard Business Review called me a symbol of ethical engineering in America's most sensitive industry. I didn't care for the label, but I knew that if my name gave someone else the courage to stand up for what they built, it was worth it. One quiet afternoon, I stared at a small plaque on my office wall, a civilian commendation from the Pentagon that read, "Outstanding Civilian Contributor to National Innovation." Below it was the quote I had requested. True success isn't just proving them wrong, it's proving yourself right by continuing forward. I didn't write that to close a chapter. I wrote it to begin another. Because out there, countless people, especially women, are still waiting for someone to say to them, "Your idea deserves to be protected." Sarah Miller's story is living proof that true success doesn't come from revenge, but from relentlessly standing up for one's values. In a world where ideas can be stolen with just a name change, Sarah chose to let her work speak instead of making noise. Through persistence, integrity, and refusal to compromise with injustice, she not only reclaimed her own dignity, but also built a real legacy, one where creators are recognized, protected, and empowered to inspire the next generation. What's your take on Sarah's journey? Was she too unyielding, or did she simply earn every bit of her success? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful stories about family and life.